Every single day you walk over one without thinking twice, you drive over one without a second thought, a slab of concrete and steel holding tons of weight, hundreds of feet in the air, held up by what? Exactly. Most bridges last for 100 years without a problem. So when one falls, it's not just an accident, it's a warning sign that something somewhere went catastrophically wrong. And the reasons are stranger than you'd think. Let's start with the most famous bridge collapse ever recorded. Not because it killed the most people, but because it was filmed. And once you see it, you'll never forget it. It's July 1940, Tacoma, Washington. A brand new suspension bridge opens across the Puget Sound. It's sleek, it's modern, and it moves. Even on its opening day, drivers notice the deck rippling under their tyres like a wave, and they start calling it Galloping Gertie. For 4 months, that nickname is just a fun bit of local folklore. Then, on November 7th, the wind picks up. Not a storm, not a hurricane, just wind. About 35 miles per hour. The kind of breeze that wouldn't even mess up your hair. But something starts happening to the bridge that shouldn't be possible. It doesn't just bounce up and down anymore. It starts to twist. One side of the deck rises while the other side drops, like the whole bridge is being wrung out like a wet towel. A newspaper editor is driving across when it starts. He gets out of his car and crawls on his hands and knees to safety as the road bucks beneath him. Minutes later, the centre span breaks apart and falls into the water. For decades, textbooks taught this as a simple story about resonance. The same principle that lets you push a swing higher and higher by timing your pushes just right. But here's the twist. Modern engineers now believe the real story is more unsettling than that. The wind wasn't matching the bridge's rhythm. The bridge was creating its own. As wind flowed around the bridge's narrow, solid deck, it peeled off in swirling pockets of pressure called vortices. Each one gave the deck a tiny twist, and because the design had almost nothing to resist twisting forces, each twist fed into the next, growing larger and larger, entirely on its own. The bridge, in a sense, built its own storm. It wasn't bad luck. It was a design that had never been tested for this kind of motion, holding weight it was never built to hold, in a way nobody at the time knew to check for. So bridges can be shaken apart by nothing more than a breeze. But that's not the only way a bridge fails. Some don't die in a moment of drama. They die slowly, quietly, for years, and nobody notices until it's too late. Genoa, Italy, August 2018. It's raining hard, the kind of rain that makes people just want to get home. Cars are crossing a bridge that's carried traffic for over 50 years. It's called the Morandi Bridge, and it's held up not by cables strung from towers, but by thick diagonal stays of steel and concrete, a design that was once considered ahead of its time. At 11:36 in the morning, without warning, a nearly 700-foot section of the bridge simply drops. Cars, trucks, and the road itself fall over 150 feet onto the riverbed and railway tracks below. 43 people die. There's no wind event here, no dramatic twisting caught on film beforehand, just collapse. So what happened? The answer had been building since the day the bridge opened. Steel cables inside the concrete stays had slowly been corroding for decades, and corrosion doesn't just weaken steel, it swells it. As rusting metal expands inside concrete, it cracks the material from the inside out like a slow-motion explosion happening cell by cell, day by day. Engineers had known about this. The bridge's own designer warned about it in a report back in 1979, urging repairs to fight off the salt air and pollution, eating away at the structure. Investigators later found that corrosion had already reduced the strength of one critical cable by around 20%, months before the collapse. That reduction wasn't considered dangerous enough to close the bridge. It was. Two completely different bridges, separated by nearly 80 years and thousands of miles, destroyed by two completely different forces. One by wind acting on a flawed shape, one by rust acting on flawed maintenance. But underneath both stories is the same uncomfortable truth. Bridges don't usually fail because of one big, obvious mistake. They fail because of small, invisible problems that nobody was watching closely enough. So why do bridges collapse? It really comes down to a handful of culprits working alone or together, and there's the material itself failing. Steel rusting, concrete cracking, cables fraying strand by strand, invisible from the outside until the very end. There's the forces the bridge was never designed for. Wind that twists instead of just pushing, earthquakes that shake at exactly the wrong frequency, floods that erode the ground the pillars are standing on. There's simple overload, modern trucks and traffic weighing far more than the engineers a century ago ever imagined possible. And there's the most human cause of all, neglect. A crack ignored, a report filed and forgotten, a repair that gets pushed to next year, and then the year after that. Here's the unsettling part. Every bridge you've ever crossed is aging in ways you can't see. Steel doesn't announce that it's rusting. Concrete doesn't warn you before it cracks. The only reason most bridges don't fall is because somewhere an inspector is climbing underneath them with a flashlight, checking cables you'll never notice, catching problems years before they become disasters. That's the real reason bridges don't collapse more often. Not because failure is rare, but because thousands of people are quietly working to catch it before it happens. And when that system breaks down, when a warning gets ignored, when a maintenance budget gets cut, when nobody double checks the twisting motion of a brand new design, that's when a bridge stops being a bridge and becomes a headline. So next time you're driving across one, doing 60, not thinking about it at all, just remember, somewhere underneath you, in a piece of steel you'll never see, there's a story about to happen. The only question is which one.